Hello, friends. I love coming and sharing with you every week. It's really one of my greatest privileges. Before I get started talking about the big question, which is the topic for today, I just want to tell you a couple of things real quick. Number one, if you're watching me on YouTube, you know that I'm kind of in a blank office. We're in the process of redoing my office, repainting the walls, redoing the floors. The floors haven't arrived. They've been to Memphis, Indianapolis, Des Moines, Kansas City, and I'm smack dab in the middle of all of those. So I don't know what they're doing going all around me, but hopefully they'll be here today or tomorrow. And maybe next week I'll have the floors done and the office done and all the things, right? But I still love coming to you guys, and so I'm bound and determined to do this, even if it echoes a little bit in the office, and even if I don't have all of my fancy lights and all that stuff. But the other thing I wanted to share with you is that I have a free webinar just for you, and it's called Your Blueprint for Losing Weight and Living Healthy. It'll give you like a sneak peek into what I've learned on my journey of losing over 250 pounds and keeping it off since 2013. So you can go to teresashieldsparker.com/blueprint to sign up and to watch it. The link will be down in the show notes. Okay, so let's talk about the big question. Do you have any idea what it is? Well, I didn't either until I was listening to a training where a coach was talking with a client and telling her to ask God this really big question. She said, ask him, what do you think of me? Woo. Those words like smacked me in the gut. You know what I mean? The thought of me asking God that question right then, it really scared me to death. You may have that same kind of fear when you think about what would God say if I ask him, what do you think of me? You know, I had already lost 250 pounds by this time, but I had just hit that mark, and I hadn't had time to really accept the fact that I was living in an entirely different body. I was doing things differently. I was really tapping into what God wanted me to do. For all of my adult life, I had been trying to compensate for my weakness of overeating and gaining a tremendous amount of weight. I thought I could sort of make up for all of my failures by working harder, like doing more tasks, which I dubbed kingdom work. But really, it was that I was working to be noticed by the Almighty. And yeah, I admit it. I thought I could earn brownie points with God. This never works, friends. It just doesn't. That's not the reason we do good works. It's not. And I knew that it wasn't how God operated, but I still felt like I had to do something. I just didn't think I could do that one thing that God wanted from me, which was to lose weight and live a healthier lifestyle. So because I didn't think I could do that, which I knew he wanted me to do and had told me to do and told me how to do it, then I would just try to approach things from a different angle, right? Cognitively, the adult me knew that I couldn't earn God's favor. I knew that his grace saved me, and that it is always freely given, no matter what I've done or not done. However, there was still a part of me that said, have I done enough to be called your daughter? Have I done enough to be called a daughter of God? For as long as I could remember, anything with processed sugar and especially baked goods had been a huge problem for me. It was as if there were two people living in my body. One was this adult with a rather rational mind. I say rather because who knows, that said, you're going to eat healthy. You're going to exercise so you can live and have a chance at a long life and do all the things that God has in mind for you to do. I didn't even know what all the things were, but I knew he had a plan for me. He tells me that in his word, right? And I knew his word. I did know it. But the other person who sort of looked like me would come out when I was hungry, angry, lonely, tired from working hard to try to earn God's favor. And that emotional part of me would say, that cinnamon roll looks so good. You deserve that. You've worked hard. Grandma would give it to you if she were here. And that's all it took. And I would have a dozen huge cinnamon rolls in my grocery cart before the rational adult me could say, halt, don't go there. Because on some level, the adult me couldn't stop allowing this emotional child who also lived inside me to govern what I did. The emotion drove me louder than any kind of rational or spiritual insight into what would be the best for me. And I so understand Paul when he says in Romans 7:18 through 20, this is in the Message, he said, I realize that I don't have what it takes. I can will it, but I can't do it. I decide to do good, but I don't really do it. I decide not to do bad, but then I do it anyway. My decisions, such as they are, don't result in actions. Something has gone wrong deep within me and gets the better of me every time. I knew those feelings, and I felt like that was the way I lived. Yeah. And you may feel the same way. I don't know. If you do, send me a message in the reviews or however you can, on Facebook or social media or wherever, on YouTube. Send me an email and tell me, this is how you feel, or a comment, whatever. But then he goes on to say in Romans 7:24, and this is also in the Message, I've tried everything and nothing helps. I'm at the end of my rope. Is there no one who can do anything for me? Isn't that the real question? In other versions, Paul says it this way, is the way they interpret what Paul was saying. Oh, wretched man that I am. See, he sees himself as a miserable, horrible person. He thinks he can't control himself. And I'm sure at that point he feels like God must think he's horrible too. Now, I've been a Christian since I was 7, and this passage always eluded me. How does Jesus set us free? I know he does, but how does he do that? If you go on to the next chapter, which, the Bible's divided into chapters, but it wasn't written that way. Well, the next chapter really answers that question, Romans 8:1 through 2. It was kind of hard for me to comprehend, but listen carefully to what Paul says here. With the arrival of Jesus, the Messiah, that fateful dilemma is resolved. What dilemma? The dilemma we were just talking about, how we want to do good, but we don't do it. Those who enter into Christ's being here for us no longer have to live under this continuous black, low-lying cloud. A new power is in operation. The Spirit of life in Christ, like a strong wind, has magnificently cleared the air, freeing you from a faded lifetime of brutal tyranny at the hands of sin and death. In other words, he has everything ready for us to step into our freedom if we just will. The NIV version describes it something like this: we are set free from the law of sin and death by the very act of Jesus' death on the cross. And because of his death, burial, and resurrection, we receive grace for everything we have ever done. When we accept Christ as ours, we literally get in the door because Jesus is our BFF, right? We're tied with him. Let's say that you have a really good friend whose dad is the football coach, right? And you want to go to the big game, but you don't have the money. And she invites you to sit in her family's, boxed seats. You couldn't have gotten in any other way, but you knew her and her daddy. Her daddy had access. It's the same with Jesus. Romans 3:26 tells us, so now, because we stand on the faithfulness of Jesus, God declares us righteous in his eyes. Jesus is our BFF, and God says that makes us able to come into God's presence, into God the Father's presence. So Romans 8:1-2 in the NIV says it this way: there is now no condemnation for those who are in Christ Jesus. So why was I then trying to earn God's favor? Because I felt condemned. I really did. Why was I ashamed of my past, even though I had repented, had lost weight, was then living a healthy lifestyle and doing what God had been showing me he wanted me to do for years? I was looking at God like he was a human. I was thinking, he's got to be mad at me. I must have to do something to make up for it, to pay for my rebelliousness. That thinking came from me, not from God. I couldn't understand God because he is not just a big me. He is not a human being. He's in a whole different category, my friends. It's not a man. He's far above a man. He is grace. It's like his DNA. Grace and God are synonymous. They are two sides of this same coin. When we sin, which we're going to because we're human, and then we confess our weakness and we repent, God doesn't condemn us. He gives us more grace, like James 4:6 tells us. Why? Because grace is there so that we begin to understand that we need God. In our humanity, we are weak. When we admit our weakness and ask for God's help, he will give us his power to do what we couldn't do 1 minute before. 2 Corinthians 12:9 in the Amplified says that God tells Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. My loving kindness and my mercy are more than enough, always available regardless of the situation. For my power is being perfected and is completed and shows itself most effectively in your weakness. And then Paul gives his answer back to God, which should be ours as well. Paul says, therefore, I will all the more gladly boast in my weaknesses, so that the power of Christ may completely enfold me and may dwell in me. So I am well pleased with weaknesses, with my weaknesses, with insults, with distresses, with persecutions, with difficulties, for the sake of Christ. For when I am weak in human strength, then I am strong, truly able, truly powerful, truly drawing from God's strength. All that strength comes from God because he has given us His grace. We already have it. We do not have to search for it to find it. We have it. If we have accepted Christ, His grace is resident in us. And it came in when we turned to Jesus and when we start trusting Him completely. So, as phenomenal as the power of grace is, His grace also brings wisdom. Ephesians 1:7-8 in the CEB version tells us we have been ransomed through His Son's blood, and we have forgiveness for our failures based on His overflowing grace, which He poured over us with wisdom and understanding. This is good news, friends, because God understands us in our humanity. However, in His position as God of the universe, He also has wisdom. This is the magnificent part of God that will teach us how to overcome with this power we just received when we admit that we can't do it on our own and we don't even know how to utilize His strength and His power that He gave us. Without God's overflowing grace activated in our lives, we won't know how to use the newfound power. And we won't understand in what situations and circumstances His power works best. So here's a little bit of a hint about where the circumstances are that the power doesn't work. It doesn't work to bring us fame or glory or to build up our own little kingdoms. It is always and only to build His kingdom. But see, the amazing thing about this grace is when we are building God's kingdom, that's when we, have the most delight that we can ever have. That's when we feel the most fulfilled. I remember back in 2012 when my daughter was applying to be a language teacher in Japan. And I happened to read a book called Wrecked I think it's by Jeff Goins. In it, he helped me understand that if it was God's will that my daughter go to Japan, then that would be the safest place on earth for her to be. I mean, I don't know how many miles away it was. Lots of miles away, lots of flight away. I know it was 12 hours in between here and there as far as time is concerned. But I never worried about her going or even being over there because I had an assurance that this was God's plan for her life. And if it was, He would take care of her. It's a good thing He helped me get that settled before she left because she stayed there for 4 years. And the last 2, she and her fiance had gotten married and they were both being language teachers over there in Japan. I couldn't plan what God had planned for her. Only He could do that. And I'm glad I didn't fight against it. I try not to do that with my children. I would encourage you not to do that with yours. Of course, I didn't always succeed, but if they have a question, my goal is to share what wisdom I have, both pro and con, and leave it up to them to decide. And then, of course, I always tell them the most important thing is, what does God want you to do? So the aside here is, if you follow this wisdom and then whatever decision you make doesn't turn out like you thought it would, that doesn't mean it was a wrong decision. It may have been a learning experience, or it could have been teaching you how to endure a difficult situation. We need to see it through God's perspective. And when we look at things that way, we have to remember that earth is just a testing ground. So every decision we make will teach us something, no matter what it is, if it was good or bad. Just learn that lesson and move on. You're just one step closer to your destiny. So back to the beginning. Remember, I talked about the big question, about asking God this big question. What do you think of me? Now, even though my sins had been removed as far as the east is from the west, as Psalm 103:12 tells us, I still believe they were a part of me. It was still like resident inside me. And it was really hard to understand that to God, they are gone. The message that I was listening to from this lady was designed to help me understand who I really am to God. And I got to the place where I just had to stop that recording and finally ask God the question. I was wrestling with it, but it was like, I got to ask him this question or I feel like I'm just going to die right here, right? Have you ever felt that way? I wanted to know, but I didn't. You know that feeling where you feel like you're standing on the edge of the rest of your life and this one step might define everything? And that's how I felt. I couldn't not ask the question. So I took this leap of faith and I asked God, what do you think of me? And here's what he said, because it was real important and I wrote it down. I am so proud of you. You are my beloved daughter, my child, my prized possession, my poetry, my masterpiece. I delight in you. I sing over you with songs of joy. You are mine and no one can take you from me. Stay by my side and you will always be under my wings of love and safe in my presence. Not because of anything you have done, but because of who you are. You are mine. You know, those words and more like them, God longs to whisper over you. In my Overcomers Christian Weight Loss Academy, I often have challenges I give to the members, and these are available in whatever course they are taking at the time. I remember I gave the assignment, this same kind of assignment, to get quiet before God and ask him this big question. And a member in the group shared honestly, I kept putting off the part about asking Holy Spirit what his truth is or what he thinks of me. I was afraid I wouldn't hear anything or I wouldn't like the answer. And I think the last part of that is where a lot of us are. We think we're not going to like what God tells us. But when she finally got the courage to ask him, what do you think of me? She was blown away by his answer, which I just want to emphasize this. That has been the experience of everyone I've led through this process. She wrote that he told her, you are mine and I love you. You are a beautiful work in progress, and getting where you are going won't make me love you more. My love is already complete now with no stipulations. I want you to succeed in your journey so you can fully experience life because I will love you more, not because I will love you more. Okay, so I'm going to read that again. He said, I want you to succeed in your journey so you can fully experience life, not because I will love you more. Performance is not attached to my love for you. I want you to succeed to also help others because you have a story to tell. And then she added, I cannot describe to you the deep, sweet feeling this brings to my soul. Such peace, such assurance. What a glorious blessing. I'm so glad I finally did this exercise. So the first part of this particular lesson was instrumental to her breakthrough. The lesson came out of my own journey. I had to accept, own, and surrender to God and then walk out my journey. And I would have never lost 250 pounds if I didn't do all of those steps. It was definitely not me, but allowing Christ to be the strength that got me through this whole process. So the journey is more about healing the emotions and the issues that are holding us back from going forward than a food plan or some kind of diet. I mean, we've all been on diets. They all work when we want them to. But in Overcomers Academy, we work on the want to. That's the most important part. That's where the breakthroughs finally come. We have to want this more than we want a slice of the best cake or pie or dessert or food, whatever food it is that you think you can't live without. And it's possible to do this because God's grace gives us everything we need for this journey. We just have to want to activate His grace every moment of every day. Now, we can pray for you, but in reality, you are the only one who can make this happen by surrendering every single part of you and every single thing that you love more than God, surrendering it to Him and asking Him to give you the grace strength for the next leg of your journey, whatever that may be. Now, I'd love for you to experience this kind of breakthroughs, the kind that others in Overcomers Academy are experiencing. There is so much more that God wants for you in this life. He didn't just come so we could eat and sleep. Yeah, that's true. He came so that we might have and enjoy life and have it in abundance to the full until it overflows. I love asking these kind of questions. And if you join the group, you'll find that I love to challenge you to go to God with many of these types of questions, because it's when we ask God the right questions that we will get answers from Him. It's not questions like, when can I buy that new car or get that better job? It's more about, what do you think of me, God? Who am I to you, God? What is your truth about that situation? What do I need to do differently to become closer to you? And so much more. These kinds of interchanges do happen a lot in our Overcomers group, and especially on our monthly Zoom calls and our weekly encouragement room meetings. And when answering questions, I answer questions in the Facebook group as well. Now, Overcomers Academy is open, so please join us and you'll be able to get in on the next Zoom call. But, I mentioned at the beginning that I have this free webinar called Your Blueprint for Losing Weight and Living Healthy. And that's really a good place to start. And that will help you understand a little bit more. Like I said, it gives you a sneak peek into the way I teach things in Overcomers Academy. I also offer one-on-one coaching through the VIP Freedom Coaching. I have limited spots in that. And if you want that kind of private coaching, I'll do my best to find you a spot. Links for Overcomers and the one-on-one coaching will be down in the show notes, along with the blueprint for losing weight and living healthy. Just feel free to go to my website at teresashieldsparker.com and look around. There's a lot of stuff there that will help you. So this week, I would just want to challenge you for this. Find a quiet space and time, or carve out an intentional time to get still before God and ask Him the big question. God, what do you think of me? Then the hardest part of your job is next. Don't say another word, but just listen. The first thing you see, hear, or feel will be God speaking to you. Don't overthink it. If you don't understand it, ask Him. Say, I think you're saying this, or I'm feeling this, or I saw this. What does it mean? It could be the start of a really beautiful conversation between you and God. And it starts with the big question, which gives God the opportunity to give you the big question. Love you guys. Until next week, sweet grace for your journey.